Hello, everybody. So first talk today is from Steve Milne. So Stephen is what's your new title? You're a specialist design person at Glean?
I do think you work with me. So I'm the lead UX engineer at Glean.
So Stephen's talking about what does good sound like. He will be taking Q&A at the end, so if you can save questions for the last 5 minutes, that'd be great. And over to Stephen.
Awesome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my talk on what good sounds like. So today, what we're going to do is have a little play with the screen reader and kind of find that out for ourselves from the perspective of a screen reader and like what makes that announcement good. But first, who am I and why should you care? Oh wait, and I'll just move the mouse away from the top. There we go, that's better. So as Mark said, I'm the lead user experience engineer at Glean. That's kind of a title that I made up. I think they expect me to take lead accessibility engineer. But I think that accessibility is just a small part of user experience. And realistically, in a user experience, you shouldn't care how people perceive your app. It should be equally good to the ball and usable by the ball. So I've been there for about 5 years now. And I'm originally from the front end. So I'm originally a front end developer. I like my React with a little bit of Sass. And then also at work, I'm helping implement a design system at the moment, which is quite fun and interesting, kind of built into the UX interest. But also kind of helps me find ways to make accessibility a bit easier within Glean so developers don't have to think about it every time they go to build a new bit of UI. So that's really interesting. Hopefully I'll be able to do a talk about that next year and how that's made our accessibility amazing. In my personal life, I love retro games and computing, so you'll see lots of BBC Micros and Commodore 64s and SNESs in my flat. I've not got enough space for it all, really. And to say that, I also picked up an addiction to train sim and flight sim last year. I spent like $1.5 on planes and trains and joysticks. It's actually really interesting when you look at older planes and trains, because they have a user experience too, and it's changed over time. The only thing is, when they get it wrong, things crash, people die, so it's interesting. And I've done a talk before at Leeds Digital Festival a few years back about how easy accessibility is. I also always meant to do a talk about how hard it can be as well at the same time. So this is my second talk, so go easy on me. Yeah, without any ado, let's get into it. So what we're going to do today. So I'm going to let you listen to a screen reader so you can see what it's like. I'm going to show you a bit of the UI that we've got in Glean. It's got some issues and they're really interesting, and we'll get to them. We're going to see if it sounds good, and if it doesn't sound good, how do we make that better? How do we identify it? And then we're going to look at the fact that it's just semantics. Oh, there we go, that's better. We're going to look at the semantics that we've used behind it and why that makes things better. And then we look at how do we actually do more of this going forward, and how do we not wait until we listen to it with a screen reader to realize things aren't that great. So, little question to wake us all up. Who here has used a screen reader before? Show of hands. Well, that's good, actually. That's good. So a bunch of you should know what's going on here. You can ignore the next slide. This is for everyone else. But for those of you that haven't used a screen reader before, what is it? Effectively a piece of software that was invented back in the early 80s for the BBC Micro down in Birmingham, which is quite interesting. And what it does is it announces all the text that's on the screen. These days, we've got buttons and windows and all that jazz. It has to announce that too. That's a lot harder. Times were simpler back then. But effectively, it's used by blind and low-sighted people to understand what's going on a computer screen. You can see a picture here of the Glean sign-in page. You'll see there's a black box around the email field. This is your screen reader. You use the screen reader with the cursor keys on your keyboard to move left, right, up, down, all that sort of stuff. Use space and enter to click things. So it's a way that you can interact with your computer without having to use the mouse or even seeing what's going on. He'll announce everything for you. Something that's interesting is focus is not the same as screen reader focus. So if you hit tab, you're going to change your focus, but cursor keys will change the screen reader focus. I'm not sure why I put that there. It's interesting, it catches people out. So, what does it sound like? Before we jump into it and I get the screen reader out, when it announces things, it'll do it in a specific format. So if it sees just raw text on the page, if you've got a white page with hello world, it's just going to say hello world. Things get more interesting when you've got buttons and inputs and things that are interactive, things that might have state. In that case, it's going to announce a bunch of properties about something. You'll notice this because there'll be commas appearing here, so it'll announce the value of the thing, the label it has, state, the role, and the description. If something doesn't have any of these, it doesn't get announced. A button doesn't have a value. So if you had a button that was click me, it'd just be click me, button. That email field before, if I type my email address into it, it would announce as stephen.milne@glean.co, email required, edit text email. So that kind of tells us what the role is and whatnot. But right, you ready? It's 9:30. It's going to be hard to get ready for this, but let's do it. Now, how do I make that play?
Presenting. Stephen Milne, insertion of edit text. Presenting required edit text. Save changes. Then button. Register email. Glean.user@glean.co. Change email. Presenting.
Oh,
Stephen Milne, insertion of edit text.
That. Okay, did you get that? That was very fast, wasn't it? Also didn't help that I still left the Scottish accent on it. That makes it a lot harder to understand, if I'm going to be honest. But I think the main thing there was the speed. So that was up at 400 words per minute. Now, actually, I could understand that. I've done so much preparing for this that I know everything gets said there, and it kind of loses the effect for me. But it's just to consider that people who are blind will often ramp the speed of the screen reader up. When you can see the entire page instantaneously. You can see everything there. But if you're blind, you can't. And you want to compete with people who can. So you're going to do it really fast. So always keep that in mind when you're creating UI. Screen readers go fast. You want things to be consistent and easy to understand. So let's do that again. But this time, we're going to do it slower. I'm going to ask you to think about something. When this is announcing, I want you to try and picture in your head this UI. What does it have in it? What does it do? What's the purpose of it? So let's try that again. This time, it should hopefully be a bit easier. Oh, it worked.
Preferred name. Stephen Milne. Insertion at edit text. Preferred name required. Edit text. Save changes. Linked button. Registered email. Stephen.milne plus user@glean.co. Change email. Group.
Registration page?
Close, close. Okay, so what kind of elements do we have on there? Was anyone able to see what things are there?
There's a button. There's a save changes button.
Save changes button, yep. And you saw registered.
Putting in name fields and so, because that's for like preferred name and so forth. So that's what made me think it was like a registration page.
Sweet. Yeah, so it's something along those lines. It's a form, isn't it? Where we might be able to fill in an email address, maybe a name, maybe save the name. Could we tell if it was accessible from that? So right now, we're pretending to be like a manual tester. We've just done a manual test of this. We've got the screen reader out on it. It's like, is this good? Should I give this the LGTM? Can anyone hazard a guess?
No. If we don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's really hard when you can't see it. It's not fair for me to do this as well. Because as you'll notice there, I hid all the words as they weren't spoken. So you only got to see the word that was getting spoken. So let's show it all. This is not what you're seeing. This is what I announced. So we're going to go from this. Now, I can see here that there's some issues that are here. We're going to try and find out what they are. And one thing that we can do is we can actually work backwards. We can take these announcements from the screen reader and turn them back into HTML, and then we can see them with our eyes. And you don't need to necessarily know HTML, but it's a really good example to kind of just see. So let's go into it. Let's break it down. So we've got the visual at the bottom, got a bit of HTML if you know that, and then the text at the top. So our first one, preferred name. As I said before, if something's just raw text, it just gets announced that way. So preferred name must be a paragraph. It's just text. Then we've got the next line. Stephen Milne, insertion at end of text, preferred name, required, edit text. There's commas here, so this means this must be an interactive thing. So we're going to read it backwards. Edit text. That's an input, so it's something you can type into. Required is required. You need to type something into this to be valid. Preferred name. Oh, wait a second. We just heard that. Preferred name is the label of the input. So actually, we'll go back and update. This is what we're starting to look like now, right? And then we've got a button at the bottom. Dimmed in macOS, it's stupid, is just disabled. I wish they just used disabled, it causes confusion. So this gives us a button. So this is what the UI looks like, or at least the start of it. This looks and feels very accessible. We'd be able to go straight back to the HTML and get out something that might be similar to what we actually read. The next part, though, is where it starts getting really interesting. Registered email, stephen.milne plus user@glean.co. So again, there's no commas here. There's no roles or anything like that. Must be plain text. So we'll jam them back out into the page. And then we've got this change email group. What's a group? In my experience, group is usually an accessibility issue. It's usually when something's interactive, but it's got no role associated with it. So it's something that's clickable for a visual user. But for a keyboard user or a screen reader user, it's kind of interactive, but they're not going to be able to click it. So in this case, we're just going to use a div here. This is kind of what this UI looks like. And now we're going to start getting some idea that there's something wrong here. Like, what was the purpose of this? So, all together now. This is what we get from the announcement. Is this what you had in your head? This little bit at the bottom, is that what you imagined?
I mean, change email doesn't look like a button.
Huh?
Change email doesn't look like a button.
It doesn't look like a button. It probably should be, shouldn't it? So we're starting to see here that these things might be related to each other. They might have some interactivity, but the announcement doesn't suggest it does. So this is great. How close did we get? We actually got really close. If you're at Glean, did you expect it to be this UI? I'm sorry if you actually worked on this as well. Like, I'm not pulling it down. It's just a really good way for us all to learn. So as you can see, we got really close. We had a preferred name field there. We had a save changes button. We had a registered email field? I don't know. And a change email button or hyperlink. And the HTML's here. It's all the same as what we got. So begs the question, is it accessible? So there's a bunch of ways we can find out if it is accessible. And one of those ways is to use automated testing. So this is an extension for a browser. It's called Wave. You might have used it before. And it'll just look at the web page and tell you what it can find problems with. And it found a problem with the preferred name field, which I thought was fine. In this case, it's kind of undefined description. It's a weird null check error, and this wouldn't have actually impacted us at all. So this is a situation where automated testing found an issue that a manual tester couldn't find. There's not really impact here, but there's invalid HTML. So it's always important to use both kinds of testing. Manual testing is by far the best, but you can also catch things with automated tests. Interestingly, it didn't notice anything about the registered email or the change email button. And that's where like automated testing kind of falls down a little bit. It can't tell what you haven't put there. We've not told it these things are clickable, so it doesn't know. So let's go back to that group. What should this be? So we know this feels a bit weird. It doesn't give us enough descriptions to kind of see it through the screen reader. So what we do is we go back to UX and we ask, what's this supposed to do? And the UX tells us it opens a pop-up for like authentication flow. Changing your email can be dangerous. People can steal your account that way. So in that case, simple, button. So we change the markup to be a button. It looks like a hyperlink. It should still be a button. Buttons do things on the same page. Hyperlinks take you to other pages. So that's our group sorted. Over this bit. Does anyone think there's any problems with this?
There's no like relationship between them.
Oh, Charlie, you know. I should have told you. So, if you used automated testing, so Wave didn't see this, but I forgot the name of the tool. But it did notice it, and it was like, whoa, this top line's bolded, and the line below it's not bold. You know what else is bold on its own line? A heading. So it told me to do a heading here. But that's not quite right. Syntactically, well, this isn't the relationship we're trying to form with these two here. And also, we follow the same visual design language between an actual field and a read-only field. And if you asked UX, they'd probably tell you the above one is a read-only field. So let's make it that way. In this situation, like, you're not intended to be able to edit it at all. So read-only works. The thing is, this also kind of cleans up our announcement. It relates registered email with that value, because they are related. And that's what a lot of accessibility is about, it's just creating those relationships across the page so that the screen reader understands the intent of things. Registered email is the label for my email address. So this gets us to this now. It's a bit better. So we'll hear kind of what this announces like. But seeing the HTML here kind of makes me think we can make this a little bit better. It feels weird to have a button which saves changes to your name, but then a field that's read-only, which you need to click a button to change. You know, once you start seeing it this way, you pull that HTML back into field, just make it editable. You know, that's actually a simpler thing to do in this situation, and have the Save Changes button do it for both. Now, I know why we did it the other way we did. It's because we had a separate path. If you change your email, we need to authenticate that. That's dangerous. But you can still do that here. If you didn't change the email, don't pop that authentication pop-up up. If you did, pop it up when you click Save. Because previously what we had before forces the user to kind of decide at that point which one they want to do. They might want to do both, but now you've made them decide which one to do first. Just let them do both and then deal with it on your end. It's a bit easier. So this is the difference it makes visually. I think visually it's a bit simpler. It works just like a normal form that you'd expect. And also, we'll hear what the difference is. Now, listen up for this one. Hopefully it should be a bit easier for you to remember and identify what things are on the page.
Preferred name, Stephen Milne, insertion at end of text. Preferred name required, edit text. Registered email, Stephen.Milne plus user at Glean.co, insertion at end of text. Registered email required, edit text email. Save changes, linked button.
Yes. Okay. So you might have thought that's still hard to understand. I don't get you, Stephen. What's improved here? But to somebody that is using a screen reader, you'll notice that was way more consistent. The fields announced in a consistent way, and they're trying to achieve a similar thing. They're just trying to communicate a value to a user and allow a user to change that. So working consistently is good. At the end of the day, you're listening to that fast, you're listening for those cues. So this is everything that I said before. Even the text is a bit easier to read. It's not like this, making assumptions about what things do to each other. So what differences have we made here? It's hopefully easier to remember and imagine. I mean, you've already seen the UI now, so you can't really go, oh yeah, that was easier to remember. But hopefully it is easier for people to remember. It's easier for everyone to copy and paste from now. Like, it's not just a screen reader that change affected. Now you can double click the email address, the whole thing selects, and you can copy and paste it out. A person using voice assistants can also do the same. So we've improved things for people that we don't even know, just by using kind of more correct HTML. What's cool is other features that people you might not know about are enabled by this. So on macOS, we've got the rotor for VoiceOver. Looks like this. It's a really cool way to like go through your entire UI and just look at just the fields, just the links, just the buttons. It allows you to ignore all the other crap around it. So you can see here, I found that field. And I'd be able to ignore the pop-up that it's in and everything else. What's nice is this is also a really good way to find bugs if you're a tester. So this is the equivalent in NVDA, which is for Windows. And as you can see here, it's got unlabeled radio button, not checked, yes. You don't even need to use the UI. And you can go, unlabeled. Nothing should be unlabeled. So there you go. Whip out the rotor or kind of element finder and other things. In Dev, by using the correct HTML and more semantic HTML, we get rid of a bunch of custom HTML and CSS. This bit of code here was what implemented that email address and the Save Changes button. It wasn't used by anything else. We'd be able to replace it with a reusable component instead with an input. So actually, we get rid of our code. Less code is always better code. Also, because we put that email address into that text, when we come to unit test things and end-to-end test things, we need to get it out so we can make sure that we set that email address correctly. When you're using a field, like the tools that we use in unit tests, for example, RTL, gives us functions just to grab that input much easier than if we just put like a data-test ID onto it. So it works better in tests. And in design, it's a more scalable UI. If you had another field to add to that, where would you add it? It's a lot easier now that it's just a normal form compared to before when it was like one field was in a form, the other field was something else. We don't really know. Do we add it just a read-only one and a button to change it? We've now got one pattern. It's easier to understand where things get put in. What's beautiful is these things don't just help people that are blind. They help all of us. They help the development team that's building it by letting them build with more understandable, maintainable code. They get to do less. The browser does more for them. So these things are great. And we get all this from being a bit more semantic. So you notice there with the registered email and the email address, we just link those two together and express that relationship to the assistive tech. And then we were able to get some more improvements after that. So we get that from being semantic. But the problem is, we're coming out from a tester's point of view. This is already been designed and written. This is maybe a bit too late to be like, this doesn't sound right, guys. What can we do to improve this? So how do we do it from the start? It starts in design. Accessibility always starts in design. Our best experiences are usually design experiences, and they're being considered from the start. If you take anything away from this talk, please let it be this article from the BBC mobile development teams. This tells you how they document the screen reader experience. This is a fantastic article. It tells you why it's important for UX designers not to leave their experience to chance. And that, got 10 minutes, excellent. I'm actually doing good on time. So, tells you that you can't leave things to chance and that not everyone knows the same about accessibility, and it's better just to communicate it. And then they go through this beautiful process of how you take a lo-fi design at the top and how you break that down and create a whole bunch of accessible documentation. So you can see here we've got like the semantic roles that UX have decided. UX have decided how content gets announced. They get to include like the business's tone of voice in this. This just gives them more power to design the UI. What's best is if you don't know a lot about accessibility as a developer or a tester, you can take this documentation. This kind of really helps you a lot to see where your gaps in your knowledge are, and you can ask questions based on this. If you use Figma like we do at Glean, I'll go back so people can get that. Sorry. No worries. I could also give you the download to this slide deck afterwards. If you use Figma, like we do at Glean, then you'll love this. So there's an annotations plugin for Figma. This lets you put these accessible annotations into your designs. This means at design time, you're thinking about how should this announce? And you can also communicate it to developers more effectively. So when me and Blair found this article, we made this quick design. It's a shame. We were working on a terrible component. It was boring. A delete pop-up. But you can see how you can actually use those annotations to start marking things up. So we're able to say delete event as a H1. If you as a developer didn't know that pop-ups need to have a H1 as along with page, then at least you've got a trigger to know that. So then we get to the next stage, building it. So I hate saying this, but you kind of do need to know like what HTML elements exist out there and what the ARIA roles are. But you don't need to always remember this. What I do is whenever I build something new, and I've never built this kind of component before, I'll go on MDN and I'll check out their element list. There's dialogue elements and all that sorts now. It's really cool. If you find anything on there that kind of closely matches what you want to build, use it and read the documentation. MDN is amazing accessibility documentation, but just general like how this works in the web. Definitely recommend like learning that. And you can use either semantic ARIA roles or HTML elements. Both of these are the same, button and div. Button is definitely easier to read. With the div, you need to remember the tab index and all sorts of other jazz. Just use the semantic HTML. That's the easiest bet. And this is the interesting part. Semantics also change depending on how zoomed in and zoomed out you are of your designs. So we had some really interesting talk about this design last year, where we were like, what should this be? So looking at this, it's totally a button. It's clickable, right? I mean, the label's terrible for a button, but we'll just go with it. And then you got 3 of these. We're really bad at this. What would this be? 3 buttons, right? That's how you get an accessibility failure. So you see right at the bottom there, there's content that appears as a list, but does not use list markup. Lovely. It's a list. So there are little things like where the semantics slightly changes, you zoom in and out of your UI and you get collections of things. As you can see here, you realize that we never communicated with this. Like the ABC, this is ordered. We can communicate in a better way with this list type. They use them out even more. This one caused a lot of really interesting conversation. What is this? How do you mark this up? What are the roles involved here? Is it just like some text and a list of buttons? Because we learned from the list. And this is what it looks like. But actually, no. In this situation, it's a multiple choice question. And so radio groups are the best solution here. So like, you don't need to know this specifically, but it's worthwhile knowing that depending on the UI you're looking on and how it's used and the functionality in it, you might want to look at different roles and different elements. And step 3, test. So we need to test our stuff to see if we've made any mistakes. So as I said before, use automated testing and manual testing. Both will find different things, and both are quite important. This is Wave, like I mentioned earlier. As you can see, it caught the issue we didn't notice when we were manually testing, but didn't catch the other two. Definitely worth running this on your website afterwards. If you've never looked at accessibility before, you might see something like 74 errors, and it's like, oh, fuck. Don't worry about it. Log them and deal with them at your own pace and learn about them. It's better that you know about these things and you can come back to them. Also, make sure you know what to expect. I think in a lot of cases, we can check things off saying, yeah, that's fine. For example, the registered email thing. Because it said registered email and the email address in the UI. It's not got that role, that association, the linkage between label and value. Nobody noticed that because they didn't really know what to expect to hear there. And for that, check other people's websites. That's what I do. When we're making some new UI, I'm not entirely sure how it should announce in a screen reader. I get the screen reader out, check another website with it, and see how they've done it. Make yourself a cheat sheet so you know what the commands are. So get familiar with a screen reader and also get used to being confused. And when things are confusing, tell people about it. And also try not to use visual context when you're testing with a screen reader. So in that situation where there was the registered email and the email address, that makes sense once you can see these two. And then the visual context, the bolded text there above the normal text gives you that idea of relationship. You wouldn't get that if you blurred the screen out. There's the disability simulator extension, which can blur the screen for you, simulate things like color blindness and whatnot. It's really handy to do this stuff and combine it with screen reader testing. That's how you kind of experience the authenticity. And also test with real people. So this is Barry that met Sky. He got to test Glean for us twice. It was amazing. Now, I was very lucky in that situation, and it's coming to events like this and networking with people that kind of got me that opportunity. That's hard to get. If you get it, totally take it though. Otherwise, get regular external VPATs. So these are voluntary kind of, I've forgotten the word now, assessments of your website or app. They'll tell you all the accessibility problems. We use a partner called Level Access. They do cost a lot of money, but they get real people with disabilities to test your app. So you know that they're genuine issues. And they also give you all the consulting you need to understand the issue and understand how to fix it. And then when you do get a VPAT through and you get all these issues, tell everyone about the issues. So something I've done is I made a accessibility overview document at Glean when we got this in, where I've kind of laid everything out. I've taken the VPAT and I've actually taken screenshots of parts of the app, and I've put a description there saying what the problems are. Who does the problem impact, and how does it impact them? And this kind of makes sure everyone's on board, and we can all learn from this experience. For a long time, we got VPATs, and I just kind of secretly took the results and went, oh no, this is terrible, how do I fix this? Where it's better that you share that out and everyone understands what those problems are, and that way when they go to do that thing again, they don't do it wrong or they ask. And that's me at the end. So what does good sound like again? Good is planned. It's designed, just like a visual interface. You want to plan for how it's going to sound. It's concise, but descriptive. We're using the correct HTML to describe exactly what we need to describe, and only that, no more. It's unambiguous and consistent. The relationships between text and the page is created, and it's consistently used in the same patterns. And yeah, we'll use semantic HTML and ARIA to integrate with assistive technology and make that experience as good as it can be, even for things that we don't know about. That is me. I hope you all enjoyed that. A nice little wake up the screen reader. Is there time for questions?
Yeah, we've got a couple of minutes for questions if anyone has any. Yes, we're here.
Sorry, I was just going to ask about with the screen reader, why does it have required, is there not a way to make required come first? Because if it kind of makes sense to me that it would be preferred name required, this is what you've currently got in there, this is where your cursor is.
Yeah, so it's interesting because different screen readers do different orders. So that's the order that Mac OS will announce with, or rather VoiceOver. But JAWS and NVDA might do different announcement orders.
Okay.
So it's not that consistent. The more you use a screen reader, the more you realize there are issues with it. But yeah, unfortunately, you can't change that order. It's also confusing when it drops things out of it. It's like, wait, is that the role or is that the state?
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Hello.
experienced much about, well, it's a question for probably all that. Any experience about, nowadays we have this, consent to cookies and cache to, how much that troubles to the people who...
Oh, so like the cookie consent banners that appear.
Yeah.
So that depends. A lot of them aren't that accessible. You have to put work into making sure that when you arrive on the page, that's the only thing that's announced. Because it'll often pop up at the bottom. And as a screen reader user, if that's not done right, you'll have to go through the entire page to the very bottom underneath the footer of the page. Because with a screen reader, everything goes in a single serial line. We get to see 2 dimensions, and there's things around there. They get one single dimension, what's next and what's previous. So yeah, those pop-ups end up right at the end, so it's not a great experience.
Cool. Sorry, I think we're out of time. Thank you so much, Stephen. Another round of applause, please.